Imran in Stratford. Hello, Imran.
That's my fault. I'm sorry, it's Manchester. I do apologise.
Sorry.
That's totally my fault. Someone said in my... So, Imran, we moved you a long way south. You're in the marvellous town, the powerhouse of the north. I won't ask if you're United or City, because if one, you're doing very well, the other, I don't want to intrude on personal grief. You're through to the Deputy Prime Minister. Imran, I apologise.
Actually, I do want to know, are you United or City, Imran?
No, apologies. I'm not actually from Manchester. I'm just working in Manchester.
Oh, right, OK, got it, right, sorry.
Okay. I'm actually an Essex man myself. I like Liverpool and I like West Ham.
Okay, all right,
Manchester City or Manchester United have nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
But anyway, the question I'd like to ask, Nick, is the other day was the subject was about the money that you be putting into the childcare.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to ask why you're so for children not being looked after their own parents. You're for the parents going to work and leaving the children with someone else. Now, I can't understand why you're trying to do this. Why can't you push the children to encourage parents to be looking after their own children rather than let other people? Yeah, I just want to know why. It's such a big thing, yeah?
No, it's a good question. I mean, look, the first thing to say is we've done a whole host of things which help all parents, whether they stay at home or not, to look after the kids, whether they go out to work or not. And of course, for mums and dads who decide to stay at home, I've huge admiration for them. I've got 3 kids of my own. It's an incredible thing to do, and that's why we're actually saying to those parents that regardless of whether you're at home or not, or working or not, you'll get 15 hours, and this is the first time this happened, 15 hours free preschool support for your 3 and 4-year-old children. And if you are a mum or a dad, again, whether you're working or not, whether you're at home or not, from a lower income family, for the first time ever, this government is giving you 15 hours free preschool support entitlement for your 2-year-old toddler. And there are other changes as well, by the way, for mums who stay at home, for instance. In the past, it was really very unfair. Women were discriminated against in the pension system. If you basically decided to stay at home to look after your children, or even actually stay at home to look after an elderly relative, that was then that you had deductions from your pension contributions.
Like
We've changed that.
You feel like it actually feels like you're penalised for actually wanting to be a good parent and look after your children, rather than you say, look, guys, you've done well. You looked after your children. They've been brought up very well. And instead of giving us incentive to stay at home, you kind of obviously now when you just explained what you've said, it makes a little bit more sense. But I still am not happy with the system. Yeah. I really am not, and I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people like myself out there.
Let's hear from Mr. Imran. I will bring you back in. Let's hear from Mr. Clegg.
But Imran, because you're right, the thing that I announced a couple of days ago is targeted only at working mums and dads, and I'll come to that in a minute. But before I do, are you a stay-at-home dad or?
No, look, I'd love to be a stay-at-home dad. I would absolutely.
You've got kids, right?
I've got 2 children. One's 11, going on 25, and the other one's 9, and he's 9. And my daughter's going on 25, obviously. But,
she's not listening, right?
I love her at school.
She's got a job if she's 25. No, on you go, Imran.
But no, like I said, I'm a working father, and half the reason why I'm angry at the situation because 5-6 years ago, unfortunately, I split up with my ex-wife, and we didn't have divorce. And part of the problem was the fact that she wanted to go to work, and I was not happy with that. And the point was I was getting no support from people around me, from the government. I was like a single man, a man on my own, saying, "What's going on here? Why is the world saying don't look after your children? Why is everyone forcing my wife out to work?"
Well, look, obviously it's entirely the choice of. Is it your ex-wife? Indeed, any woman, any mum to decide.
Hang on, it's their choice.
Let's get Mr. I will give you a final point, but then we must move on.
Imran, the only thing I would say, it is everyone's choice, but do remember there are lots of mums and dads, and I meet them all the time, who say, "I would like to work a bit more, but it's just simply not worth it." So all I would say to you is, Imran, I've explained to you the support we're giving to all parents, whether they stay at home or not. But do remember there is another side to the coin, if I can put it like that. Namely, there are parents who actually want to work more, but they simply don't find it worth it because of the prohibitive costs of childcare, and that's where we are. We're explicitly helping them in some of the recent announcements we've made. So we've said that you basically get tax-free childcare if you're working, but we're setting the rules in a way that you only need to earn £50 or more per week to be eligible, and also for the first time ever you'll get that help for your childcare costs, the tax-free childcare help, even if you're self-employed, because there are lots of schemes which are provided to people who are employees of company through employer childcare schemes. So, Imran, I hear what you say. You obviously feel about this very strongly. We do provide help to all parents, but we are providing, you're quite right, help to those parents who at the moment are saying we want to work more, but it's just not worth it, and we're not being given enough support to do so.
All right, Imran, we have to move on. Do stay in touch. It has been reported, of course, that this was very much your policy, very much a Lib Dem policy. Was it difficult to persuade David Cameron and the Conservatives of its merits?
No, it wasn't. This is something we worked on together. In fact, David Cameron and I announced it together, there were three bits to it. If I can just there's the bit that I think most people have quite rightly paid a lot of attention to, which is that from September of next year, if you work and you have these high childcare costs, you'll get up to £2,000 a child in help from this tax-free childcare help. Secondly, however, if you're on universal credit in the future, and I bet you'll be quite a lot of listeners who will be on universal credit in the future, that's the simplified benefit, you'll get 85% of your childcare cost cover. That helps those who need the most help. And thirdly, and crucially, and this is something that David Laws had worked up for me, which is a new early years pupil premium. I've talked before on this show about how important I think it is that we have the pupil premium in the school system, so that there is the incentive for teachers to really help and devote resources and time and attention to those children from the most difficult backgrounds. We're now going to apply the same approach to early years.
All right, let's move on to other questions.
Yep, Graham in Croydon. Hello, Graham.
Oh, good morning.
Hello.
My question is about the budget.
Yep.
In view of Grant Shapster's advert on Twitter, this was to do with the penny off the pint and halving of the
tweet.
Bingo. Sorry?
The tweet.
Tweet, beg your pardon.
Yes.
Yes,
You're not saying tweet.
No, tweet, EE, not I.
I don't want to cause problems here.
All right, well, anyway, Grant Shapster said
something
about, a penny off the pint and halving of the bingo tax. So my question is, would it be fair to describe this budget as a budget for plebs?
No, Graham, it certainly wouldn't be. Look, as it happens, I think Grant Shapster, I think the tweet was a bit silly, but partly because actually the issues involved in this budget were really quite serious, including, by the way, giving support to the bingo industry, an important industry, giving support to our pubs and so on. But there were just much bigger things at stake in the budget as well, namely how over 24 million people are going to benefit, as they will now do, with an additional £100 tax cut, because we've raised the point at which they'll start paying income tax even further to £10,500, which of course I'm just incredibly pleased about and proud about, because it means that we're over-delivering on a front page Liberal Democrat manifesto commitment, but the very significant package which we've been working on for weeks to help savers, because people who save first should be trusted more with how they manage their own money, their own savings. But secondly, after years and years of very, very low interest rates, we need to make sure as the recovery starts taking root that people who haven't really, savers who haven't really benefited from that, stand to do so from now on. So look, it was a coalition budget through and through. The way this works is that George Osborne, David Cameron, Danny Alexander, myself, we sit around poring over these spreadsheets and these numbers for weeks and weeks, and I'm really very proud of it. Actually, all of it, because I think it rewards work. It helps those who need help through the increase in income tax allowance, which is, if you like, in money terms, the biggest measure in the budget. But it also does a lot for many others. It helps industry.
Okay, you may be proud of it. Someone who wanted to call you, but unfortunately he's rather busy now, has left a question. Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls.
Yes.
Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls asks you
He will be glowing in his praise, no doubt.
The question I would have for Nick Clegg is if he says that he is trying to do things differently from the Conservative Party, why has he been the person who supported the rise in tuition fees, the rise in VAT, the bedroom tax hitting people with disabilities, and why hasn't he done more to stop, for example, a married tax cut, which only goes to a third of married couples? Why isn't he doing more to get our young people back to work? Why isn't he delivering? It feels as though he's all radio talk shows and no action when it comes to standing up for working people in our country.
How could I be polite about this? I mean,
please don't be polite.
Ed Balls raises a number of issues there. He says, why are we not getting more young people into work? Actually, youth unemployment is now lower than it was when Ed Balls left office. Relative poverty was higher under Labour than it is now in this government. We've got 500,000 children in relative poverty, fewer children in relative poverty than there were when Labour left office, and delivering, as I said earlier, we are over-delivering on many of my manifesto commitments. I said, front page of my manifesto, £10,000 would be tax-free, income tax-free for everybody. We've actually raised it now to £10,500. I said we were going to deliver the pupil premium in schools. I've just over-delivered and announced we will deliver an early years pupil premium to precisely help the people who Ed Balls and his party used to care about. But look, at the end of the day, other than the kind of classic post-budget point scoring between people like me and Ed Balls and politicians from different parties. There's a fundamental truth which the Labour Party cannot evade, which is that they presided over the biggest economic catastrophe this country has seen in a generation. It was Ed Balls' failure to run the economy properly, to manage the banks properly, which wiped off 7% of the value of our national economy, costing every household in this country over £3,000. That is what we are still recovering from. And as George Osborne rightly said, this is still going to take, there's still a lot of painstaking and frankly downright difficult and sometimes unpopular work to do to restore the country's economy to full economic health because of this heart attack in our economy which Labour presided over back in 2008. And until Ed Balls and indeed Ed Miliband come clean with the British people and say, we really messed up, we're sorry, and we've learnt the lessons from the past, I just don't think people are going to trust them with our economy and with their money.
Move on to other questions if you want.
Elaine in Bexley. Hello, Elaine.
Hello, my question is concerning social housing and what you're going to do about social housing. I don't mean the housing help to buy scheme because that is not relevant for a lot of people that are living in poor conditions. What are you going to do about building decent 3-bedroom houses for low-paid workers, the ones that clean your toilets, the ones that clean the hospitals, the ones that do the restaurants, that can't save £5,000, that have got no chance of living in a decent home and are living in a properly poor conditions through no fault of their own? They're not claiming benefits. These people don't claim benefits, but you're wiping your hands of them. You don't think they're important.
No, that's not true.
No, it is true. I find that incredibly difficult to understand. I live in Bexley, London Borough, which is a very expensive place to live, right next to Greenwich. My daughter lives in a 2-bedroom flat with 3 children. Her partner works permanent nights. He has to sleep on his sofa after a night shift because they've got no bedroom. They've been told they'll be there for a couple of years yet. The bedroom my grandson lives in cannot take 2 beds, so the children are split. My grandson's got one room, my granddaughters have got the other room, and my daughter sleeps on the sofa while he's at night work.
Okay.
And then when he comes home...
it's that important context for the Deputy Prime Minister. Go on, your question now.
No, Elaine,
I want to know whether there is going to be any chance of some decent 3-bedroom buildings or decent housing so people can swap towns.
All right, you're still on the line, but we must let Mr. Clegg get a response.
Elaine, of course, I think everybody, my heart goes out to you, and most especially to your daughter and your grandchildren, and having that amount of pressure on a family like that it's terrible, because of course people should be entitled to expect if they work hard and they do the right thing, that they can find a home to live in and that their family can be together and not pulled apart. By the way, it's one of the reasons why we have to do something about the fact that there are still far too many children, and you've talked about your own family, who don't have a place to do their own homework and that live in very overcrowded accommodation, while there are empty bedrooms going spare, if you like, in other parts of the system. Which is, but Elaine, can I just try
one sentence? Then I will come back to you, Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, Elaine, I know you feel I can't, I'm afraid, give you a precise answer about what's going on in Bexley, because I can find out if you like, because as you know, it depends very much from area to area, council area to council area, about the different house pressures, what the plans are on social housing, and indeed what the rental prices are like. But what I can tell you, and I will send you all the details, is that in terms of money to build more affordable homes, we will be building more affordable homes by the end of this Parliament than the previous government did. We're investing billions of pounds into. But Elaine, so I know you're. Please just try and, if I can, I'll send you the details. We're, for instance, also providing unprecedented support to housing associations. We're basically underwriting their finances through something called a Treasury Guarantee to make it cheaper for housing associations to build more affordable homes. It is essential. I couldn't agree with you more. It is essential we build more homes generally and more affordable homes in particular.
But you're
quick
saying
response,
affordable
Elaine.
homes.
Really quick.
Yeah, you're saying affordable homes. I'm saying rentable homes, not affordable homes. They can't afford to mortgage. They can't afford to buy a home. They want a rented home that they can live in. And social housing's out the window since they gave the right to buy came in. They've never replaced the houses they sold.
No, for every home that is being if you like, acquired through right to buy, an equivalent home is being built. So it's not I totally accept what you say about the fact there is not enough housing. There hasn't been for a long time. We haven't, as a country, built enough homes for a very, very long period of time, especially for those who can't afford to get their feet on the first rung of the housing ladder. That's why, as I say, we're putting unprecedented amounts of money into building more affordable homes. We're providing unprecedented amounts of support to housing associations, and it's just simply not right to say that the right to buy scheme is somehow depriving the housing market of extra homes. For every home that is bought under right to buy, another home is being built.
All right, Elaine, we'll stop there. Elaine, thank you. I must bring in some emails. Deputy Prime Minister, I've asked you questions about all sorts of things over our year and a bit together, whether you have a onesie. I don't think I've ever put you on the spot like this. Hannah in Newcastle says, never mind the budget, everyone's talking about the airplane. What is Mr Clegg's theory on the missing Malaysian airline jet?
I mean, I'm like everybody else. I'm completely appalled and perplexed by it. To see these relatives who've now spent, is it 12 days cooped up in a hotel, not hearing anything that makes any sense to them. Where's their son gone? Where's their daughter gone? Where's their husband? Where's their wife? We're now seeing on the news this morning possible sighting of debris in the southern Indian Ocean. But the southern Indian Ocean, I mean, it's like...
It's massive.
It's massive, but it's like 2,000 miles away from the Australian coast. Yes. You couldn't be more in the middle of... No, why would someone... If that, tragically turns out to be the case, why would someone steer a plane into the middle of the ocean until I guess what it runs out of fuel? But look, I'm not going to start speculating. Okay. We have to let them get to the bottom of it. But it really is one of the more harrowing things I think I can ever remember, appearing on our television news screens.
There's a briefing at 9:30. We'll bring you full details on that story. Coming back to domestic affairs, Kenneth in Dartford asks, is it right that Baroness Varsi describes the Eton mess at the heart of government in Number 10, and Michael Gove says the number of old Etonians are ridiculous?
Well, look, you have to get Michael Gove and Sayeeda Varsi on the show to
Does it matter?
Speak for themselves. I think at the end of the day, it's really important what people do more than where they come from. And I hope, but people will need to judge for themselves. Ed Balls doesn't agree, but I hope, for instance, if you look at what we've done as a coalition government in this budget, cutting taxes for millions of people on middle and low incomes, making it easier for people to manage their own money in retirement, making sure that industry stays in Britain and doesn't offshore elsewhere. I hope people will see that what we're trying to do is I think is the right thing, is creating the stronger economy that we need after the shock in 2008, but trying to make sure that the benefits are spread as fairly as possible.
When you consider that David Cameron and Oliver Letwin and Joe Johnson and Ed Llewellyn, his policy chief, and his chief economic advisor Rupert Harrison, they all went to Eton and you only went to Westminster. Do you ever feel left out, Mr. Clegg?
I don't.
Do they ever start singing songs or talking about house rugby triumphs in which you did not partake?
I don't feel wildly excluded. But look, I mean, how the Conservatives want to organise themselves and who writes their manifesto and that's entirely a matter for them. All I can say, for speaking for myself and my party, is that we just... It sounds trite, but we just want to try and strike the right balance between doing all this really, really difficult stuff to sort out the ongoing problems in our economy, but making sure the maximum number of people, regardless of where they come from, but especially those people on lower and middle incomes, get stand to benefit.
Did you ever play tennis against Eton at your school?
No, I can't remember. I don't think so.
God, I wish you'd beaten them if you had.
Do you think?
I think that'd be fantastic.
Well, thank heavens I can't remember.
Perhaps they weren't on your circuit of fixtures. We move on. Other calls.
Robin in Herne Hill.
Hello, Mr. Clegg. I wonder how he can say the EU is good for jobs when Dunlop Birmingham are moving their factory to France. It's not the first time it's happened. Your sparring partner in Eastleigh, when the Ford Transit factory in Southampton was being moved to Turkey, which isn't even in the EU, with an EU grant of £80 million. How can you come up with a figure of 3 million jobs depend on the EU? Isn't this just a spurious figure to frighten people?
This is Goodyear, of course, moving what's known as the Fort Dunlop plant over to France after, I think, about 7 or 8 decades of undisrupted production. Mr. Clegg.
The 3 million figure is not spurious. It's a figure which the relevant Whitehall department has looked at and has published as an authoritative figure. In fact, more than 3 million of jobs that are directly or indirectly dependent on our position in this big European market of 500 million consumers. And look, it's logical. If you're part of a great marketplace of 500 million shoppers and buyers, people you can sell stuff to, unimpeded, no tariffs, no barriers, no delays at the border, it just figures, doesn't it, that therefore it helps British businesses create jobs in our country, because we can export things from Britain with no hindrance to 500 million people in our own backyard. Look, I was up in Sunderland in the northeast last week, and I was speaking to people from Nissan there. Nissan, massive employer there. They first came there in the mid 1980s. We're now working with them to significantly expand how many number of people they employ there. The bulk of what they produce, and I think there's a sort of a car that comes off their production line every few seconds, goes for export into the rest of the European Union. If you suddenly had whatever it is, 10% tariffs, so a tax of 10% tax, because we're outside the European Union, which is, by the way, the tariff that exists for in the car trade and many other parts of the world. Just imagine what it would do to someone. I mean, the Nissan bosses would quite logically say, well, in that case, we will move to somewhere else closer to our customers. So, it is not a spurious number. It figures. Of course, the European Union needs reform, but at the end of the day, I think it's really clear that being in Europe means being in work, and that's why. And we'll have this debate, obviously, with Nigel Farage next week.
Less than a week to go.
That's why I think, however seductive it might seem to people to say, oh, can't we just turn our back on the world and pull the drawbridge up? The consequences, the risks of doing so, particularly for people's jobs, are very, very serious.
Quick response from you, Robin.
Well, no, I think he's talking nonsense. See, the politicians don't get it. Even some people in UKIP don't get it. Unless we manufacture. Before we joined the EU, 83% of GDP was manufacturing. Now it's down to 13%. Why would we shackle ourselves to a sclerotic organisation which won't be able to impose tariffs, because the World Trade Organisation will take action against it, and the Asian economies are the future, Brazil and people outside of the European Union.
Well, Robin, we disagree. I mean, the idea that manufacturing is declining in this country, or indeed any other developed economy, because of the European, is just complete nonsense. And secondly, you're quite right to say we need to trade more with some of the big, new, emerging superpowers on the kind of global stage, Brazil, India, China. Do you really think that a Chinese trade or a Brazilian or an Indian trade negotiator is going to take us more seriously, important though we are as an island of 60 million odd people, than actually representing the world's largest block of 500 million consumers? Of course we have clout. We have clout working together, which allows us to negotiate as equals with the Chinese and the Brazilians and others, which we wouldn't have if we were out there on our own.
Mike, let's not go over too many of those arguments. That, of course, is in the Great Leaders Debate. We're looking forward to that. It's next Wednesday, 7 p.m. here on LBC. Nick Clegg and Nigel Farage. And Nigel Farage. No, don't worry. You're going to let me get his name in. We haven't even started. Yes. Now put the gloves back off. Take the gloves off. We don't need it. May I ask you a question? Yes. My only question. If I get it in. Sure. 150 MPs are supporting the idea that not paying your TV licence should not be a criminal offence. You not necessarily go to court, necessarily go to jail. The Prime Minister is reported as saying it's an idea that is worth looking at. Your response?
Yeah, we'll look at it. Of course, we'll look at it. And the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, Maria Miller, will of course it needs to be looked at. It's been looked at in the past, and it hasn't been taken up in the past. But let's look at it.
No one would pay it, would they, Mr. Clegg? If they didn't have to, let's be candid.
As I said, let's look at it, and we'll look at it. And I think it needs to be decided, by the way, not now overnight, but in the context of the renewal of the BBC charter and the licence fee and so on. And you know the arguments. The arguments are people saying, why is this clogging up the courts? The counter argument is, well, if you change it, if you in a sense relax the penalty, if I can put it that way, you decriminalise it, then the BBC loses a lot of money. If the BBC loses a lot of money, local radio stations go off air, and it's bad for the BBC and so on. So look, it's something which has been looked at in the past. Of course, we should look at it. Always keep these things under review, but I think we should do that and we will do that in the context of the kind of decisions on the longer term future.
And you're confident then? I appreciate it, but the people would still pay.
No. Look, I'm not. I'm not certainly not decided in my own mind about whether this change is merited, and I think even a small loss of revenue for the BBC could jeopardise things that a lot of people depend on. Just a small drop would mean that you're suddenly not able to fund a number of local radio stations, for instance. But of course it's a legitimate debate, and of course you should look at it, and that's what we'll do in the context, as I say. And then let's make up our mind, and then I'll look at the evidence, and we'll decide as everybody else will.
Back to those calls to call Clegg. Mr.
Mike
Clegg.
in Cheshunt. Mike.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Clegg.
Hello.
After next year's general election, when the Liberal Democrats are confined to history...
No, when we'll triumph, and I'll be Prime Minister.
How high on the list of reasons for the failure will your support for HS2 come?
Well, Mike, how can I put this? We clearly come at this from slightly different angles, both on HS2 and the fortunes of the Liberal Democrats. I am optimistic about both, and you are clearly quite negative about both. HS2, I think, is a project which will make a dramatic difference in improving the capacity on our railways, which is really straining at the seams. We're still transporting millions of people up and down the country on railway lines which in effect were built in the Victorian era. As a Sheffield MP, I feel incredibly strongly that we should make sure that we have the infrastructure of the future so that the north benefits from greater prosperity, not just the south. And I think if you look around the world, one developed society after the next is investing in high-speed rail. We should do so as well. My strong suspicion, Mike, is that when it's finally built, people will look back on it and think, how on earth did we cope without a proper high-speed link up and down the spine of the country?
Mike,
Nobody is suggesting that we don't have additional rail lines. Of course we do. We simply do not need to spend this money on 225-mile-an-hour trains in what is relatively a tiny country, unlike China, where they've got vast differences. Mm-hmm. The average distance between towns and cities in the UK is about 20 miles. This is a vanity project now, Mr. Clegg, for politicians. You're determined to push it through. Even HS2 Limited lies on their homepage because they say Midland cities and northern cities will be connected to the European high-speed rail link. You just scrapped the connection anyway. Right. Anybody coming from the north will have to walk down the Euston Road.
Well, Mike, you're referring to something, for those who are not aware, a guy called Sir David Higgins, the new head of HS2, has just recently published a report, and he said one way of making it sort of financially more sensible is not to do the very short link between HS1 and HS2, but actually comes out, in my view, with irrefutable further evidence about the wider economic benefits of HS2 and some really good suggestions about how we should do it faster going north, and also link it to the wider regeneration of transport links between our great northern cities. I mean, I, as an MP from South West Sheffield, am strongly supportive of that. When I met him last week, I said so, because, for instance, if you want to travel from Sheffield to Manchester, it's a very, very scenic route over the Peak District, but you toddle along at sort of almost walking pace. Any other country would say that not only should you have a mainline high-speed link in the way that you disagree, Mike, but I think is necessary, but also then couple that with better links between our major cities. And the only point I would make, Mike, is if you concede, as you do, that we should build new railway line capacity, in other words, new railway lines, not just fiddle around and do a sort of patch and mend job on the existing railway lines, why don't we do it in a way that it lasts, that it's the best high-speed new railway line, that we don't have to then do another new railway line within a matter of years?
Couple of emails. Thank you for your call, Mike. Couple of emails. Rachel in Hastings. Nick Clegg, if you agree that Ed Miliband was really lame at the budget yesterday, why was he so lame?
He didn't mention the budget. He's supposed to. Sorry, it's a rather old-fashioned view. The whole idea, can I just put this in plain terms, is it is a budget. And the leader of the opposition is supposed to have a view about the budget. And instead, he literally gave a speech he could have given on any other day of the week, on any other side. He didn't mention the budget. It was as if he'd sat there, I don't know, maybe just thinking about the football results for an hour while George Osborne was setting out the most radical shake-up of our pensions and savings system since 1921. And the leader of the opposition, when he's heard that, literally has nothing to say. All I can add is that not only does the Labour Party still not acknowledge its own responsibility, directly their responsibility, for the mess that was created in 2008 and the pressure on household budgets, when they have an opportunity to set out what they would do about it, they can't even answer or respond to the proposals we put forward in the budget speech by George Osborne yesterday. One last email and one last question. Yep. The last email, why haven't you signed, along with other celebrities, the hacked-off advertisements that appeared in a number of papers earlier this week, says Jeff in Ruislip. To give you background, apparently people such as Michael Palin, Sir David Attenborough, Alan Ayckbourn, Bob Geldof are calling for support for a system of press regulation underpinned by Royal Charter. The sense is it's not moving quick enough, but your name's not a signatory to that. I don't think it was a letter from politicians or by politicians. It was by a number of
Do you
celebrities.
support the basic? I'm sure you've seen it in the papers.
What they're saying is something which of course I support, and we all support actually across the political parties, that we should now get on with the implementation of the agreement.
Why does it seem to have been lost in the long grass?
Well, I think when we talked about it at the time, it's always going to take a bit of time, because what you're basically saying is that absolutely avoid heavy-handed regulation, direct regulation of the press. That would be abhorrent to any liberal. But give incentives to the press to make sure that where things go wrong, people feel there's independent recourse. That you don't have this old clapped-out thing in the past where the press was sort of judge and jury where they made mistakes, and that there are sort of, if you like, incentives. This is what Lord Justice Levers, not the government or anybody else, said, that there are incentives for the press to enter into that scheme by basically registering themselves. Now, that then needs to play out over time. The incentives need to work. Parts of the press need to decide that they think it is worth entering into it. I don't think that was going to be an overnight thing, but all the people who've signed that letter have every reason to say in a letter that they would like to see the thing kind of bed down as quickly as possible.
And lastly, to prove we're not just national, Mr. Clegg, we're international. Nick Clegg, introduce the last caller.
Becky in Philadelphia in America. Becky, what time is it?
5 a.m.
5 a.m. Right, okay.
That's the appeal of the British Deputy Prime Minister. Becky, fairly succinctly, your question, if you would. Becky?
I just wanted to tell you that I'm a follower of British politics over here, and I know it sounds crazy for somebody that lives all over here, but we are a descendant of you guys, after all. And actually, my question was about Scotland, because my two boys, 4 and 0, they are of Scottish descent. And I had a question just about the referendum, and that was, if Scotland votes to leave the UK, should David Cameron resign? Because it would be a terrible legacy for the government.
Well, Becky, firstly, thank you so much for either staying up or getting up early, whatever you've done to ring in. On Scotland, look, I so fervently hope that in the referendum in Scotland in September, the Scottish people decide to remain part of the family of nations that makes up the United Kingdom. I'm a huge supporter, as it happens, of greater Scottish identity, Scottish nationhood. We've already got a very devolved arrangement where Scottish law, Scottish education is separate. I think it's a really good thing, for instance, that all the major British parties, I'm not sure if you noticed this, Becky, as a follower of British politics, that Labour, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, we've all now said, if Scotland remains part of the United Kingdom, as I hope, it's not the end of the road in terms of further devolution. We can do more things, for instance, to give more tax-raising powers to Scotland. But I think, notwithstanding having deepening, further enriching Scottish identity, nonetheless, we are better together. We really are. There's a whole bunch of things that we can do together much more effectively if we remain part of that family of nations than if we pull the United Kingdom apart. And that's why I'm not going to start speculating about what happens after the result, Becky. I just think it's really important that we should all join together to say we really want Scotland to remain part of the UK. Simple as that.
Becky, time for you to get some sleep. Time for the Deputy Prime Minister to get off to do more work. Next time you hear from him, of course, on LBC, it'll be 2 Nicks and a Nigel. It's Nick Clegg, Nigel Farage and me, Nick Ferrari. Deputy Prime Minister, thank you.
Looking forward to it.
You better believe how much we're looking forward to it. Call Clegg here on LBC.
In or out? Head to head. Nick versus Nigel.
UKIP leaders don't turn up to vote in the European Parliament.